Stephen King isn't just about horror, you know. Here are 19 of his books that are perfect for anyone who don't like things too scary. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Now this is the latest of my book specials, so regular viewers around here will know that once a month, at least, I do a book special, which is kind of different to my usual going through the movies and adaptations of Stephen King's work at the moment and giving you 19 reasons to watch them. I'm rambling already, how have I done that? This is a book special, we're talking Stephen King books, and most of these specials are requested by you, the watchers. And you can do that by dropping a comment in the description. Although, I am tempted to say, for now, maybe don't send me any suggestions, because I was checking my backlist the other day, and I've got a lot. So either don't send me any, or let me know if you'd just be happy with me dropping multiple book specials every week for the next few weeks so we can catch up, because honestly, I've got a lot to get through. But if you enjoy the specials, I'm happy to give them to you. So let me know. Now, this special, normally I give a shout out to the person who requested each special. This special has been requested by so many of you that I just honestly forgot to write all your names down. But this has been my most requested special, Stephen King books for people who don't like horror. So that's what we're going to do. And obviously I've waited until October and Halloween season to put this out. But hey, much as that's funny, I think it works as well, because you might be in need of a break from the spooky stuff. So hopefully the 19 books I'm going to suggest in this list will do that for you. I'm going to go through them in a spoiler-free fashion, just trying to give you a bit of a synopsis of the books to maybe see which ones strike a chord with you. And if you're someone watching this who likes the horror stuff but maybe has a friend who isn't into the horror stuff, send them this video. If you're desperate to get your friends into Stephen King but they don't like horror, send them this video or send them the list of books from this video. I'm confident that anyone will find at least one that they'll be happy to dip into and that they will enjoy. And of course, like I said at the start, it is worth noting that Stephen King has never just been about horror. Sure, he wrote Pet Sematary and It, but he also wrote the stories that gave us Stand By Me, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption. Yes, the same guy wrote those books. So, he's got his chops that are not just horror. And hopefully in the 19 books I'm going to go through here, you'll find something that will encourage you to get started on your own Stephen King journey. Like I said, it's going to be spoiler-free. Let's get into it, shall we? Here are 19 Stephen King books that non-horror fans will enjoy. Right, I should say I'm doing these in chronological order of publication, mainly just because that's a nice way of doing it, but also because I'm starting with The Dead Zone, which is my absolute favourite Stephen King book, and I don't want people to accuse me of just favouritism or whacking this right at the start. So, The Dead Zone. Very early in his career, Stephen King showed with this book that he was about more than just horror. This came out in 1979, really early in his career, and this one is a political thriller, it's a wonderful drama, it's a terrific romance, and it does have some supernatural stuff and some scary moments, but I would never class it as a horror novel. So the hook of this is Johnny Smith, our main character, is in a coma for nearly 5 years, wakes up and realizes he has this special ability whereby when he makes physical contact with somebody, he can see the future. So that might be when a nurse touches him and he sees that nurse's house is on fire and the nurse's daughter is trapped inside and needs saving. But it might also be he shakes hands with someone who is vying for political office and he sees what disastrous future that might lead to if that guy gets into office. But honestly, it's probably the best drama and joint best romance that Stephen King has written, and just a propulsive, thrilling book that feels just as relevant now as it did when it came out, mainly because of Donald Trump existing. But really, really, honestly, a great book for non-horror fans. Okay, second, I'm going with different seasons, but with an asterisk. So there are 4 stories in this book, 4 novellas, 4 short novels. 2 of them are perfect for non-horror fans. We've got Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, which gave us the movie The Shawshank Redemption, about a man being sent to prison for killing his wife when he insists he's innocent. And we get The Body, which is the story that gave us Stand By Me, 4 young friends going off into the woods on a coming-of-age adventure to go and track down a body of a missing kid. They are both perfect for non-horror fans. They're not horrific. They're just wonderful, compelling human stories. The other 2, I would advise discretion on. Apt Pupil is very horrific and dark and psychological horror about Nazi war criminals. And it is nasty. It's a great story, but it is nasty. If you're not into horror, I wouldn't dip into that. And the breathing method, the final story, is spooky. Like, the whole vibe is spooky. It's a story within a story told at this gentleman's club who like spooky stories. It's not scary as such, but it's spooky. It's a bit dark, and it deals with childbirth and things like that. So there might be some stuff that you're just not into. I would give it a try if you're feeling brave. Act Pupil I would probably dodge if you're not a horror fan. But the other two, chef's kiss. Get onto them. And you can get standalone editions of Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption and The Body. So maybe just pick those up. So next up, The Talisman. Now, this is not one of my favourite Stephen King books at all. It's something he co-wrote with Peter Straub. But if you're into fantasy, you will love this. And it is not particularly horrific at all. So it's the tale of a young boy who has to travel across America to rescue a talisman that can save his dying mother. And he can do that by flipping from our world into a parallel world called the Territories. And stuff that happens in the Territories has a knock-on effect here, and vice versa. So it's a big fantasy, epic, swashbuckling adventure. And a lot of Stephen King fans love this. And it is not a horror story. It has a couple of nasty moments, but not a horror story at all, despite this saying the ultimate experience in terror. Not true for The Talisman. If you like the fantasy stuff, you might also consider Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. I nearly included that in this list, but then I reflected that actually in every single book there is a load of gnarly, horrific stuff. So by all means give that one a go, but it is nastier than The Talisman. And I see that more as a horror fantasy crossover rather than just a fantasy series, although it does lean more towards the fantasy. And I do have a full guide to The Dark Tower, which I'll pop up here if you want to have a look and explore that. But The Talisman, definitely good for non-horror fans who like things a bit more fantastical. Okay, sticking on the fantasy side, we've got The Eyes of the Dragon, which is a book that Stephen King wrote for his then 12-year-old daughter after she complained that he never wrote anything that she could read. So it kind of feels like a medieval story. It's dragons, it's kings, it's princes, it's people locked in towers, it's dark magic, it's two-headed parrots, all of that kind of stuff. It's very much YA fantasy, so it won't be for everyone, but it's not a horror book. So if you're into Game of Thrones, all of that kind of stuff, you might want to give this a try. So Dolores Claiborne, this is one of King's more literary works, and it's something that I would generally recommend to pretty much any fan of fiction. It's a really gripping and fascinating story of domestic abuse and marriage and survival. So Dolores Claiborne is this older woman who has been arrested on suspicion of murdering her elderly boss, which she insists she didn't do, but the whole book is first-person narrative. She talks about how she did have to do away with her horrible, abusive husband many years before. And we get the story of that and the story of her life and the decisions she made for the benefit of her and her family. Now, that might sound like it could be a quite horrific story, but honestly, it's a gripping drama more than anything. Does have a couple of nasty moments again, but I wouldn't class it as a horror book. I would just class it as a really good book. So next up, The Green Mile. I'm just holding part 1 here. It was originally released in 6 parts. You can get it in one complete volume though. So this is the book that gave us the 1999 epic movie of the same name. A wonderful, wonderful story about being human and being gifted and the burdens of those gifts that you might feel. So this is set in the 1930s in the death row ward of a prison in one of the southern states in America. And over the course of this story, we just get to know the inmates and the staff, and it's all hooked around the arrival of this enigmatic character, John Coffey, who has been arrested for the most hideous of crimes, but is way more than he might seem. Just an incredibly powerful and moving story. Again, a couple of nasty moments. We're dealing with executions after all, but not a horror story. Not at all. Okay, Hearts in Atlantis. So this is a book that has 5 stories in it. 2 sort of novellas and 3 short stories. And they're all connected by the strand of Vietnam, and also on a secondary note of boomers and how boomers mess things up. For us, and if they look at themselves closely, for themselves also. This isn't horror. This is some of King's most biographical writing, particularly him reflecting on his college years. And it's just some of his best writing as well, really. Some great stories here that will really make you think. that will really hit you right there. It's drama, it's growing up, it's change, it's friendships, it's relationships that build up and break down. Loads and loads of good stuff in here. Absolutely worth checking out. And underrated as well. So The Colorado Kid. This was the first book King released on the hard case crime imprint. And while it's not a crime book per se, it's kind of a fun twist on the unsolved murder mystery story. This is a tale, it's a story within a story set on a small island off the coast of Maine. And we learn the story of a body of an unidentified man who was discovered on a beach and the quest for answers around it. And it's just got this real, come sit down next to me by this fire and let me spin you a yarn vibe to it that I really, really like. The ending might frustrate you, but it won't scare you. It's definitely not a horror book. So Lisey's story. This is a literary work that really dives into a marriage and dissects it. We get its quirks, its language, and we learn what happens after a marriage is over. So Lisey is a widower, and she, in this book, finally starts going through her husband's stuff. Her husband was a horror writer, and she learns so much about him, his past, where he got his ideas from, and encounters some of his more scary fans. This is comfortably the darkest pick on my list, and it might be one that you build up to. But honestly, I can't recommend it enough. It's kind of a bit magical realism at times. It's dark, it's weird. It's beautiful as well, though. And it's one of King's own personal favourites. So does that go for it? Definitely not horror, though, even though there are a couple of moments with one scene in particular that are brutal. Okay, Blaze. This is one of the books that Stephen King wrote under his Richard Bachman moniker, and this has come to be the least gnarly of the Bachman books. This is basically King's take of Mice and Men. Only one half of the duo is dead and is a ghost in the ear of the other half. And our remaining character is trying to earn a big payday by kidnapping the baby of a very rich family. It's actually a really heartfelt story, and just one that is very, very moving. And I think if you're not a horror fan, you will enjoy this. And if you are a horror fan, you'll still like it because it's a great story. So next up is 11/22/63. And if you only take one book from this list, as somebody who is not into horror, who wants to get into Stephen King, make it this book. It is the Stephen King book that I can recommend to anybody who enjoys reading any type of fiction. So the hook here is around the Kennedy assassination. We meet our main character, Jake, whose friend Al, who runs a diner. He discovers that Al has a rabbit hole out the back of his diner, and he can go back to 1958 and buy cheap meat and bring it back, and that's why he sells his burgers for such a cheap price. But we also learn that Al can go back to 1958 for as long as he likes, and when he comes back, only 2 minutes have passed. It turns out he's actually been in the past for a long time, trying to stop the Kennedy assassination, but the past doesn't like being messed with, and Al ends up getting cancer and comes back to the present to pass on his mission to Jake. And that's what this book is about, Jake going back in time to try and stop the Kennedy assassination. So we've got that time travel hook, we've got that political thriller. It's a great drama. It's also the best romance I've ever read in any book. It's such a wonderful adventure. A lot of pages, but you will fly through them. And it smacks. It slams from page 1 all the way to page 740 in this edition. Like, it never lets up. It's such a joyous romp of a ride. And like I said, if you only take one book from this list, make it this one. You will not regret it. Okay, next up, Joyland, back on the hard case crime book. This is one set in the 70s at a theme park, at a carnival type theme park, and is a joyous love letter to that time, to young love, to getting your heart broken, and it has a murder mystery in there as well. And the twist in this got me both times I read it. It's a great, fun read, not horror, a couple of scary moments, but it's more of a crime thriller than anything else. And it's just that great 70s period piece. Really fun. Okay, next up, the Mercedes trilogy, which started with Mr. Mercedes and then had Finders Keepers and End of Watching there. And this is Stephen King doing crime fiction, giving us a recurring detective character. So the start of this story is the Mercedes killing, where somebody drives a Mercedes into a line of people waiting outside a jobs fair and kills a bunch of them. And that's the one crime that Detective Bill Hodges never got round to solving during his career. And we fast forward and Hodges is retired and the Mercedes killer starts taunting Hodges. And then we get this cat and mouse game unfolding over this book and a couple more after it. If you like crime fiction, Stephen King, he's a great storyteller. He reads a lot of crime fiction and it really shows in this because he just nails it. That's about it. And if you like this first book, there's 2 more to explore. So go fill your boots. Next up, Gwendy's Button Box, a quirky little, almost YA story he wrote with Richard Chismar about a girl who is given responsibility to look after this magic box that has buttons all over it. Each button represents a different continent, and if you push that button, you can cause chaos and devastation to that part of the world. The box also gives you magic chocolates that keep you healthy and bring you success, and special, very valuable coins that you can go and sell for lots of money. And we follow Gwendy Peterson, a young girl who is given responsibility for this box, and we see how she looks after it and how it affects the decisions she makes. Like I say, it's a fun sort of almost YA-leaning story. And if you like this, there's more Gwendy stories to explore. So Richard Chismar wrote Gwendy's Magic Feather on his own after this, and then King came back for Gwendy's Final Task, just there, which rounds off the trilogy. So again, if you like this one, there are 2 more to explore. Okay, Elevation. This is a novella that will make you feel warm and uplifted. The hook here is a guy, our main character, realises despite not showing any changes outwardly, he is losing weight. And he realises that he can't really stop it, and he's probably just going to get to the point where nothing is tethering him to the earth anymore. He's going to float away. But rather than be sad about it, he uses that as an opportunity to look at his life, his relationships, his friendships, and really get stuck into the local community. And it's just a really uplifting and heartwarming story. Okay, The Institute. Now, this story about a government agency who kidnap kids with psychic abilities and set them to work on various nefarious tasks. It's definitely more of the sci-fi thriller. Has a big Stranger Things influence on here as well. But at the core of this, it's the kids that really made this. Their decisions, their relationships, their friendships. And like I say, big Stranger Things vibe with that whole young protagonists and seedy government agency. So if that sounds like your bag, give this a go. Not horror at all. Okay, next up, Later, another hard case crime book. Now, despite the fact that the narrator in this consistently tells us that this is a horror story, I would argue it's not. Although it does sit in the spooky realm, because the hook of this is our narrator can see dead people. Not only can he see them, he can talk to them. And when he asks them questions, they have to tell him the truth, which leads to some interesting situations, particularly when our narrator's mum's girlfriend is a cop and realises what talents our narrator has. So again, even though he says it's a horror story, and there are a couple of nasty scenes, and that whole ghost thing just makes it naturally sit in the horror genre and spooky, I wouldn't call it a horror story. It's just a really fun, silly ghost story. Okay, next up, Billy Summers. Now this one leads more towards crime. Billy Summers is an Iraq War veteran who has become an assassin, but he only takes out bad people. And in this story, we see Billy taking on his final job and then the fallout after he's made the hit. This book surprised me by how much I liked it. King's storytelling in this is just firing on all cylinders. You will be hooked from the start. And yet it has a couple of nasty moments. We're dealing with assassinations after all, but it's not a horror story. It's definitely a crime thriller, and it moves. And the ending really got to me as well. So yeah, I definitely recommend it for non-horror fans. And if you've got a vacation coming up or a long trip, perfect read for that kind of scenario. So to round off, we've got Fairy Tale, which is actually my least favourite Stephen King book. So quite funny how we started with my most favourite, ended with my least one, but it definitely warrants a mention here. This is a fantasy story. I'm not that into fantasy, which is probably why I don't like it. I really like the first quarter of this book, where we see our main character, who is a teenager, so developing a friendship with an older man. But then our main character and his dog go into another world, and that's the bit where it loses me. But if you're a fantasy fan, that's where your ears and your eyes will probably bug out, and you'll really get into it. I know lots of people online who really enjoy this as a fantasy story. It didn't work for me. But if you're into that fantasy stuff, there's loads of it here, and you will probably really, really dig it. And it's definitely not a horror story. Okay, there we go. 19 options for those of you out there who want to get into Stephen King but perhaps don't want the horror stuff. Have a go. Let me know how you get on. If you only pick one, make it 11, 22, 63. You won't regret it. And for those of you watching who are horror fans, who perhaps have been asked this question by your own non-horror fans, what do you think of this list? Is there any that I missed off? Is there any that you would suggest? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. In the links in the description, you can find my range of Stephen King themed band shirts. You can find my own collection of short stories, Once More Around the Sun. Those ones are horror stories, so maybe not for everyone watching this video. You can sign up to my newsletter, bunch of other things as well. But most of all, thank you so much for checking this video out. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you're not already subscribed, maybe hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more in the future. And hey, share it with a friend, particularly if you've got a friend who doesn't like horror but wants to get into Stephen King. And come back again soon, because we're going to be back onto the movies and adaptations next, and we've got a whole new decade to start.